We all live our lives by the clock. It tells us when to get up, when to go to work, when to eat. It feels solid, right? Like it's this universal, absolute thing. But what if I told you that the standardized time you and I take for granted is actually a pretty recent invention? And that it was born from total chaos, a ton of conflict, and frankly, a whole lot of industrial age frustration. All right, let's get into it. This is the strange and very crooked history of time itself. So, to get us started, just imagine this for a second. What if your city ran on its own unique time, and the town just, say, 20 miles down the highway was 3 minutes behind you? What if every single town and village had its own clock, ticking away on its own schedule? It sounds like an absolute mess, but believe it or not, for most of human history, that's exactly how the world worked. And at the heart of that mess was this really fundamental conflict. For literally centuries, we all ran on sun time. Super simple, totally logical. 12 noon was just the moment the sun was at its highest point in the sky, right where you were standing. But then the 19th century happened, and with it came the railroads, which needed something totally new: railroad time. See, for a train to run on time, and more importantly, safely, over hundreds of miles, noon had to be 12 everywhere along that track, no matter what the sun was doing. And just like that, the natural rhythm of the Earth was basically at war with the mechanical precision of a clock. And we're not talking about a small problem here. Before standardization, North America was this crazy patchwork quilt of different times. Just look at this number: over 144 different, official, local times that the railroads had to keep track of. Can you imagine? Traveling from, say, Indiana to Illinois might mean you'd have to change your watch several times. It was a complete and utter logistical nightmare. This quote, wow, it just captures the feeling of the era so perfectly. Think about it. You walk into a busy train station and you see a whole wall of clocks. One for each major railway line, plus another one for the local town's time, and they're all showing different numbers. Charles F. Dodd, one of the guys who helped fix this, called it a delusion where clocks stared at each other defiant of harmony. It's just a beautiful way of describing the growing pains of a world that was suddenly moving and talking faster than the sun itself. Now, this chaos wasn't just an inconvenience. It was getting people killed. When you have conflicting local times, schedules get miscalculated, and that led to some absolutely catastrophic head-on train collisions. The railroads realized they couldn't just manage this mess anymore. They had to end it. This crisis literally forced a revolution in how we think about and live by time. And that revolution? It was led by these three guys. First up, you have Charles F. Dodd. He was an educator who came up with this really elegant idea of 4 clean, 1-hour-wide time zones for North America. Then there's Sir Sanford Fleming. He was a Canadian railway engineer who, and this is a great story, missed a train because of a time mix-up and became this passionate global crusader for a 24-zone worldwide system. But then you have William F. Allen. He was the ultimate pragmatist, the organizer who took these brilliant ideas and actually did the hard, grinding work of getting hundreds of competing railroad companies to agree to the plan. And their success was incredible. It all happened on a single day. On Sunday, November 18, 1883, at the stroke of noon, railroad stations all across the U.S. and Canada just stopped their clocks. They waited a few minutes for the new standard time to arrive and then started them all up again, all at once. In some places, they called it the Day of Two Noons. And just like that, in a single instant, a private industry, not the government, mind you, had invented the modern time system we all use today. But you know what? People were not thrilled. Not at all. This new, totally artificial railroad time felt bizarre, even offensive. This protest from a newspaper in Indianapolis says it all. People felt like some big corporation was hijacking their lives. They were being told to ignore the actual sun in the sky and instead obey an industrial machine. The idea that you would now have to marry by railroad time, that just shows you how deeply personal and strange this whole change really felt. So getting the North American railroads on the same page was a huge deal. But getting the entire world to agree on time, well, that was a whole other level of challenge. We're talking national pride, colonial power, and some seriously stubborn political showdowns. And the biggest fight by far was between Britain and France. So in 1884, there's this big international conference, and they vote to make the meridian line in Greenwich, England, the world's prime meridian, the 0 point for all global time. Why? Well, mostly because Britain's navy and shipping industry were so dominant that most of the world's maps already used it. As you can imagine, France was not exactly happy about adopting a British standard, so they abstained from the vote. For years, they just stubbornly stuck to Paris time. But my favorite part is what they did in 1897. They passed a law defining their official time as Paris Mean Time retarded by 9 minutes and 21 seconds. And guess what that time difference is? Yep, it's the exact travel time between Paris and Greenwich. It was this incredibly petty but also brilliant way of syncing up with the rest of the world without ever having to say the word Greenwich. And here's another thing that might surprise you. Back in the US, even though basically everyone was living by railroad time, it wasn't actually the law of the land. It was just a private industry agreement for 35 years. The US government didn't officially recognize time zones until the Standard Time Act of 1918, and that was mostly just to help implement daylight saving time during World War I. Okay, so if time zones are supposed to be based on these nice straight lines of longitude, 15 degrees apart, then why does a modern time zone map look like such a crooked, chaotic mess? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Politics and money almost always win out over clean geography. Let's take a quick world tour of some of these time zone oddities. First stop, China. Geographically, that country is massive. It's wide enough to cover 5 full time zones. But since 1949, the entire nation has run on a single time, Beijing time. And that is a purely political decision designed to promote a sense of national unity. But the result is pretty wild. If you're in the far western parts of China, the sun might not actually rise until 10 a.m., and what we'd call high noon can happen as late as 3 in the afternoon on the clock. Next up, India. Have you ever wondered why some countries have time zones that are off by 30 minutes instead of a full hour? Well, during British rule, India was set up with a single time zone, UTC plus 5.5 hours. It was a geographical compromise, basically placing its standard meridian right down the middle of the country to try and balance out the nearly 2-hour solar difference between its far eastern and far western coasts. But this might be the most incredible story of all, the Pacific island nation of Kiribati. Its islands used to straddle the international dateline. That meant the eastern half of the country was literally a full calendar day behind the western half. Think about that for a business week. For 4 days, it was impossible for the two sides of the government to even communicate. So in 1995, they just moved the line. They drew this giant loop eastward on the map, effectively making their eastern islands jump forward an entire day, all just to solve a business headache. Amazing. So how in the world does a country end up with a time zone that's off by 45 minutes? It actually comes down to some pretty simple and surprisingly political math. See, the Earth spins 360 degrees in 24 hours, which means every single degree of longitude you travel equals 4 minutes of time. Nepal set its official time based on a mountain peak near its geographical center, which mathematically works out to be UTC plus 5 hours and 45 minutes. But choosing that very specific 45-minute mark, just 15 minutes different from its gigantic neighbor India, well, that was also a subtle political statement of its own national independence. And that brings our story right into the modern era. Because in the last 50 years or so, the very definition of what time is has gone through another revolution. And this one is just as profound as that original switch from sun time to railroad time. We've gone from basing our clocks on the spin of our planet to the vibration of a single atom. So, welcome to the age of Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC. This is the official standard that runs pretty much our entire digital world. And unlike the old GMT, which was based on how long it takes the Earth to spin, UTC is based on atomic clocks. These clocks are incredible. They measure the unbelievably stable, predictable vibrations of atoms to keep time with a precision that is just mind-boggling, far, far more accurate than our planet's wobbly rotation could ever be. But this creates a new, kind of cosmic problem. Our atomic clocks, they're perfect. They're totally stable. The Earth, on the other hand, is not. Its rotation is actually gradually slowing down, and it's a little bit irregular. It's affected by everything from the tides to movements in its molten core. So what's happening is our perfect atomic time is slowly but surely drifting apart from the astronomical time of our planet. And the temporary fix for this, ever since 1972, has been something called the leap second. Every once in a while, the world's official timekeepers would just add an extra second to the clock to let the wobbly Earth catch up. But these irregular, unpredictable 1-second jumps are a total nightmare for our digital world. They can crash computer networks, disrupt financial markets, throw off GPS systems. The solution, the little bandage, has actually become worse than the problem it was trying to solve. And all of that has led to a truly monumental decision. The world's scientific community has voted that by the year 2035, the leap second is going to be abolished. Done. This means artificial civil time, the time on your phone, on your computer, will no longer be corrected to stay in sync with the sun. Atomic time and Earth time are officially going to be allowed to drift apart. Which brings us right back around to where we started, doesn't it? The whole history of modern time has been this long, slow march away from the natural rhythm of the sun and toward a purely human technological standard. First, the railroads forced us to give up local sun time for a synchronized clock. And now, our digital world is forcing us to abandon the Earth's own rotation for the perfection of an atom. It took over a century, but it really seems like railroad time has finally, completely won. So the question is, what does it mean when our clocks are no longer tied to our own planet? Are we really leaving the sun behind for good?